everyone and welcome to another tutorial on our channel Learn at Knowstar. Today we are going to write a SQL query to find n consecutive date records excluding weekends. Now we have already done a tutorial on this scenario earlier, and one of our viewers had asked to write a query on this scenario, so that is what we are going to do now. So in our earlier tutorial, we had written a query to find n consecutive date records. We did not take the weekends in account, so we considered the weekends as continuous dates. So today we are going to write a query where we are going to exclude the weekends. And also we had used a little different approach to find those n consecutive date records. We had used the row number function. Today I'm going to tell you an approach which will use the lead lag functions, as was also suggested by some comments that there's another approach in which we can use the lead lag function. So that is what we're going to use today in writing our query. So let's get started. So today I'm going to be working with the attendance data. It contains three simple columns: employee ID, login date, and an ID. So every day an employee logs in, that is counted as a day on which the employee worked and attended the office. If I just do an order by employee ID and login date, we will be able to see that. So this is the employee ID 1 and we have 5 records, and you can see that there's a record for 1st of September, then there's a record for 2nd of September, and there are no records for 3rd and 4th, which are Saturday and Sunday, and then the next record is for the next Monday, which is the 5th of September. So in our case today we are going to consider these two records as continuous records because the employee attended on Friday and he also attended on a Monday. So before that, since this is a new approach that we are going to take, I'm going to walk you through the various steps in which we can find out the n consecutive days. So in this case, we are not considering the weekends. We will consider all the days as continuous, including if there are any entries on weekends. So if the entries are missing on the weekends, that would be considered as a break in the continuous data. So let's first understand the approach, and then we will change that query to exclude the weekends in the query. So the very first step is going to be comparing these dates between the lead and lag rows. So we are not really considering the lead row. What we are going to do is we are going to compare every record, so every row, and here I'm going to check if the previous date for this record, so this is 2nd of September, if the previous login date was 1st of September, means the previous date was the current date minus 1, then I'm going to consider it as a consecutive record. So let's write the query and see how it can be implemented. So I'm just going to let's select the employee ID, and then let's select the login date. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lag function on the login date column, and I'm going to use my Windows partitioning. So over partition by employee ID, because I have to calculate it for each employee, and I'm going to order by the login date. Sorry, there's no comma here. From attendance. So if I simply execute this query, we will be able to see the dates, the login dates from the previous rows. So here you can see, for example, there was no previous row because this is the first row for that employee. So you get a null. In the second row, which was for 2nd September, we get the previous date as 1st of September. 5th of September is for the previous date is 2nd of September, and so on. So now what I need to compare is basically if I just subtract one day from the current login date. So to subtract that, I need to use a date function, which is going to be date add. So date add function can add a number of days. If you want to subtract a number of days or go back in the timeline, then you have to use the minus sign. So I'm going to subtract one day. So first I have to define that I'm going to be adding or subtracting in terms of days. You can also add or subtract in terms of years and weeks and so on. So for day, it is going to be a D. And then I'm going to subtract one day. So I'm going to do a -1 over here, and I'm going to subtract it from the current value of the login date. So this is going to be my query. What I'm going to do now is just execute this. So you can see that if I subtract over here, this is what is the lag date. So let's just name it as lag date to be clear. So this is your lag date, and this is the calculated date after subtracting 1 day from the current date. So now I'm just going to make a comparison and see that this calculated date is equal to my log date. If it is equal to my log date, then I'm going to mark this record as consecutive. If it is not, I'm going to mark it as not consecutive. So now, before doing that, let's just look at this example. The third row you will see the current date, login date is 5th of September. If I just subtract 1 day, you get 4th of September, whereas the previous records date is 2nd of September. So they're not going to match. And in this scenario, I'm going to mark it as not consecutive. Whereas when we are going to modify the query later on to exclude the weekends, we are going to mark this as consecutive. So stay tuned and watch this video till the end to find out how we can exclude the weekends. Okay, so for the time being, for making that comparison, what I need to do is use a case statement. So I'm just going to write a case query, case when this data at d-1 login date, which means the current login date minus 1 is equal to the lag login date over partition, whatever we have found out. And I'm going to, because this is a case statement, so when it is equal to, then mark it as a 0. So if it is consecutive, we are going to mark it as 0. As soon as the consecutive streak breaks, we are going to mark it as a 1. So for every break, we are going to get a 1 in that column. And let's just end this case statement. And instead of calling it as lag date, I'm going to call it as consecutive. Now, just to be clear as to what is happening, let's include these columns back. So that we know what is the calculation that is happening. So I'm just going to put these calculations as well. So this was our lag date, and this is going to be our query. So now we will have those markers of consecutive or not. So now if I look at the data wherever, because this is a first record, okay, first record, there is no previous record, that's why it is marked it as a new record. So this is a new batch of dates that has started. Now here it's going to be a continuous batch, consecutive and date records. So as long as it is going to be consecutive, this consecutive flag is going to be marked as 0. Now here you see that there is a break, and therefore because a new batch of dates has started, for that employee ID we have marked it as 1 again. Now from, you can see 5th, 6th and 7th, these are continuous batch of dates. So as long as it remains continuous and there's no change, the value of the consecutive flag will remain 0. Okay, so now we have identified whether it is a continuous batch of dates or not. Once I have identified that, what is the next step that I want to do? So the next step is to find out or identify which batch is currently in progress. So let's say that an employee attends and there are 5 breaks. So he attends from 1st to 2nd, then he attends from 4th to 5th, then he attends from 7th to 8th and so on. So every time I need to increment the batch number. So the first time he attends from 1st of September to 2nd of September, I'm going to call it as batch number 1. Then there's a break and he attends again from, let's say, 5th to 7th, then I'm going to call it as batch number 2 and so on. So for each employee now, I'm going to identify the batch. I'm going to give a number to the batch, an incremental number to the batch. Once I have identified the batches, then I can do a count on those batches. So here I'm just going to identify, I'm just going to differentiate between the different batches so that I have an identifier for each batch, and then I can do a count on that batch to find out the total number of consecutive days for each batch. So to do that, I need this as either a subquery or a CTE. So the CTE works best for us because they're going to be multiple logics, so we have to be writing multiple CTEs in this case. So here it's just a consecutive flag CTE, so I'm just going to call it consecutive CTE so that we understand what is happening. So let's just put it within brackets. And this is the CTE. Now, what is our next step? Once we have defined the CTE, we are going to sum up the values of these consecutive flags that we have generated, and that would give us a unique batch number for each employee ID's date. Now, how that is going to work, we'll just see by writing this query. So if I just do let's do a select star from this and do a sum of this flag consecutive as, let's say, batch number, and this is going to be from the CTE that we have just written, which is consecutive CTE. And this sum of consecutive, again we have to use the Windows function because this has to happen for each employee ID. So we have to partition by employee ID, and we can order by login date again. Okay, so this is a CTE and we're going to reference the columns from the CTE. So for every calculation that we make within the CTE, we have to provide a column name. So here you can see there's a no column date column, no column name column. So this is here, right here, and we can call it as, let's just say previous date. And now if we execute our query that we have just written, let's just execute it and see what we get. So what we're going to get over here is, okay, so these are your consecutive records for employee ID 1. And every time there's a break, the consecutive flag will be set to 1, and as long as it goes continuously after the break, the flag will be set to 0. So here you will see that we have done a sum on this consecutive flag. So every time there's a break, the batch number would get incremented, because every time there's a break, the flag sets to 1, and now we are saying sum of this value. So for the very first batch, it would remain as 1. Now as soon as there's a break, and the flag again gets set to 1, because we are just doing a sum on the complete records for this employee ID, it is going to take all these 3 previous records and sum them up. So the sum here becomes 2. And as long as the consecutive end days are continuing, the sum would remain the same. So you can see that for the first consecutive end days run, the batch number is 1. Okay, now it changed, so there's one more one added to it, and because as long as the consecutive days are running, the consecutive flag does not increment in value, therefore for that batch the number would remain the same. So this is how we can identify the batches. So here you can see that there are 2 batches for employee ID 1, there are 2 batches for employee ID 2, and there are 2 batches for employee ID 3 as well. Now what is going to be our next step? So we have identified how many batches are there. We have uniquely identified each batch. Now I want to do I just want to count for how long this batch has run. So to count that, what I'm going to now use is a row number function. So I'm going to use the row number function and rank all these records of the same batch. That is going to give me the whole length of how long the batch has run. Now let's just see how that is going to work, and it will make it clear. So to do that, I need the information from the statement that I have written on the previous CTE. So I'm going to contain this within another CTE. So if you want to write multiple CTEs, one after the other, each referencing the previous one, you just need to include a comma and give the other CTE name. You do not need to write the with word again. So I'm just going to call it, let's say, batch CTE as, and put them within brackets, and then I'm going to write my statement on this CTE. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to generate a row number over here. So select star, let's select everything from the previous CTE so that it is easier for us to understand what exactly is happening with the data. And then I'm just going to use the row number function over here. And for the row number, I am going to partition by employee ID and the batch of that employee ID, because I want to count only for that particular batch for that employee ID. So the partition by is now going to be on 2 columns, and the batch number that we generated from the previous CTE, and then order by login date. Okay, and I can call it as batch count, and this is going to be from my previous CTE, batch CTE. So now if you execute this, okay, now if you execute this and you go to the batch count column, you will see, so this for employee ID 1, you have the count as 2 over here, and then you have the count for the second batch. You can see the count goes till 3. So whatever is the maximum count, maximum row number that has been generated, that basically is the count for that particular batch. So what I'm going to do now is I just want, in the end, I just want to see the count of the batch. So how long, for how many n consecutive days at a time the employee attended. That is my purpose. So I just need those n consecutive days, which I can get from the maximum row number that has been generated for each batch. So what can I do to select this? I need this record and I need this particular record for the employee. So what I am thinking of doing here is, now that I am going to, because the consecutive flag is set as 1 only when the batch changes. So somehow I'm going to actually order by the login date in descending manner, so that wherever this consecutive flag is set to 1, there I will get the maximum row number, and then I can just filter by the consecutive flag as 1. So what I'm going to do over here is just set it, this ordering by to descending, and then I'm hoping that the row number will be generated in a reverse fashion. So every time this 1 is occurring, that is where the row number will be set to the maximum count. So if I execute this now over here, let's check the first batch for this employee. So you can see that the dates have been reversed, login date in our view of the data, but we're not concerned with that. But the batch count, the maximum batch count has been set when the consecutive flag is 1. So now this is the only record that I'm interested in, and then the next record I'm interested in is again for consecutive flag equal to 1, and so I can now implement a filter where I will just select consecutive flag is 1, and then I can do any kind of filter on the batch count. That is the maximum batch count that we have. So to do that, again, I need the information from the statement that I have written. So now we need to put it within another CTE. So there are multiple CTEs involved here. Everything is step by step, so you will be able to understand why there are multiple CTEs involved, because whatever calculations we are doing are based on the results of the calculations from the previous CTE. So this is the simplest way to write it, and it would be very easy to understand for anybody who looks at the code. So here I'm just going to say batch count CTE as this, and this is going to be our final CTE, and then I'm just going to write the final select statement where I'm going to select everything from the CTE, and you can select whatever columns are needed for you, and then I just need to apply a filter, so I can use it in the where clause where I'm going to say consecutive equal to 1. And I mean, if you are not checking for n consecutive days, you just want to find out how long every batch lasted, then there is no need for any other filter. So let's just run it till here and find out. So what you're going to get over here is for employee ID 1, we have 2 records. You can see for batch number 1 and 2, the first batch was for 2 consecutive days, the second batch was for 3 consecutive days, and so on. So now if you want to find out that how many employees attended at least for 3 days at a time, then you can include a filter here saying batch count is greater than equal to 3. So you will get only those records which fulfill that criteria. So you can check, you can apply your filters as needed. So this is how you can find out n consecutive days. So this can be implemented in the scenario that we considered earlier, where we considered sales for n consecutive days. So if you want to find out that there were sales for at least 5 days, then you can use this similar logic to find that out using the lead and lag functions, aggregate functions. Okay, so The actual scenario that we wanted to answer here was how to exclude weekends in this scenario. So as we said earlier, if there's a record for Friday and the next record is for Monday, we want to consider them as continuous days and we don't want to consider that there's a break there. So to do that, the only change that we need to make over here is by adding a condition to our case statement. So here we said that the previous date was equal to the lag date that was calculated by the lag function. Now what we're going to do is we're going to include an or clause over here. Add one more condition to the when clause. So let me just copy this and then we can modify the condition for the weekends. So we still need the lag login date because we want to find out what was the login date on the previous record. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to check if the day is Monday, because the break in this case would only happen between Friday and Monday. So we will check on each Monday. So to check whether it's a Monday or not, what function we're going to use is the date name function and day of the week for login date. If it is going to be Monday, and so this is the date that we calculated here as the previous date. So if it is a Monday, I'm going to calculate the previous date as which was 3 days before Monday. So 1 day before Monday is Sunday, 2 days before Monday is going to be Saturday, and 3 days before Monday is going to be Friday. So here I'm just going to subtract 3 days from my current login date. So if it is a Monday and the date on the previous record is equal to the date of or the 3 days prior date, which is going to be Friday's date, then I'm going to consider them as consecutive. So that is what we have done over here. So what I'm checking here is, first I'm checking if it is a Monday. If it is a Monday, then I'm calculating the date of the previous Friday, and then I'm going to check that the previous record's date in the table is of Friday. If it is of Friday, then I'm going to mark it as a consecutive date. So here I've just added this condition if the login date is Monday and the Friday, the previous Friday's date is equal to the lag date that we obtain over here using the lag function, then it is going to be a consecutive record, otherwise not. So what we are going to do over here is let's just exclude this condition for now and just do a select star and see what is happening over here. So you will see what is happening over here for employee ID 1. Now we have got a batch count of 5. So it is all one batch. Why it is one batch? Because here you will see that these are in reverse order, so we have to start seeing from the bottom rows. So 1st September, 2nd September, 5th September, 6th and 7th. So 1st September there was no previous record, so the consecutive flag has been set to 1, which means this is a new batch that has been generated. After that, 2nd September means consecutive flag, it's still consecutive days. 5th September, still consecutive days, and 6 and 7, so on. So all this is just one batch now, and you can see that the batch count is 5. So there were 5 consecutive days that the employee attended if we do not consider weekends. So if we go down below, you will see that same is the case for employee 2 as well. So there are 5 consecutive days, and if we go down over here, you will see now here there is a break. So for employee ID 3, the employee, okay, where is the employee? Okay, there are 2 batches that have been generated. So the employee attended on 1st September and attended on 2nd September, which is batch number 1. So 2 consecutive days he attended. After 2nd September, the employee attended on 6th of September. So here there is a break because employee did not attend on the Monday. So there is a break here, and that's why it is considered as a new batch. So 6th and 7th he attended. So again, it is considered as a new batch, and the date and the count for that batch is going to be 2 consecutive days. So now if we include these flags which we said, let's take away this flag still for some time. So I'm just going to check out the lengths of each batch. So you can see for employee ID 1 and 2, they are just one continuous batch of 5 days. For employee ID 3, there are two continuous batches. Okay, first starting on the 1st of September and the second starting on the 6th of September of 2 days each. Now, if I want to check this condition, that where the batch count is at least greater than 3, we should not be getting employee ID 3 because they attended only for 2 consecutive days at a time. So now if I execute this query, you will see that I only get records for employee ID 1 and 2 who attended for 5 consecutive days. So that is a change that you need to make just for considering the weekends, and this is how you can use the lead lag functions and write a query to find out sales for n consecutive days or attendance for n consecutive days, and so on. So I hope that this video was useful. If it was useful, then please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also like, comment and share this video. Also, if there are any more scenarios that you want answered through our video tutorials, then please put them down in the comments below and we will pick them up in our next video tutorials. Thanks a lot for watching, and again, all the code and all the syntax will be shared in the description below, so you can go to that description link and find out all the sample data as well as the SQL code. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye.